Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I am so glad to be here. And my promise to you, as always, is I want to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine that's going to energize your business and help you stay social. Because after all, don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And welcome, Dr. William Attaway.
Lorraine, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am just so stoked to have you. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I'm a mindset and leadership coach. What I do is I come alongside entrepreneurs, agency owners, and leaders to help them discover that they don't have to hit all the ditches themselves on their journey. So often leaders find themselves as they have to hire people for fulfillment, and they look around and they're now leading a team. That's a skill, and it's not one that everybody's born with. And so I help those leaders. I help them to discover the skills that they need, help them to develop those skills so they can be the leader that their team needs today and tomorrow.
That's absolutely fascinating. You talk about mindset here. You mentioned it, so I'm going to go down that road a little bit. I once heard a quote that mindset is everything. Would you agree with that?
Yes. 100%. I believe 95% of your success or failure is attributable to your mindset. Truly. And I think that is because your thinking affects every part of your life. Your mindset's rooted in your beliefs, Lorraine. And so your beliefs are what influence your thoughts. Your thoughts influence your words influence your habits, your actions turn into habits, and your habits are what make you successful or not.
Yeah, and I would assume, when it comes to leadership, mindset is very important because you kind of got to get rid of some of those, I don't want to call them demons, but the little voice in your head that's telling you, or the saboteurs, or whatever you want to call them, but that get in the way of you leading the way that you can lead. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The sabotage that we can do to ourselves is so much greater than the sabotage anyone or anything else can do to us. It's how we talk to ourselves. And self-sabotage is real. Imposter syndrome is real. All of these things are things that every entrepreneur is going to struggle with at some point in their journey. There's another way. There's a better way. There's a way to defeat these problems and learn to live in a more healthy way. That's what I do.
For those of my audience that probably don't, maybe they have never dabbled into the whole mindset thing. Could you give an example of, some of the struggles with mindset that we have and how we can sort of shape them and turn it around to be the very best self?
Absolutely. So I'm thinking of one of my clients from 18, 19 months ago, who was really struggling with this problem in his business that he could not seem to get around. He just seemed stuck, couldn't get past it. And so we met. I started asking him questions to try to get to the root of it, because rarely is the symptom the actual cause. Most often the symptom has something deeper. So I'm going to ask questions. We're going to dive into it. Well, it turns out that he knows what he needs to do when we really dive down deep into it. He's just not doing it. So we explore, we talk around, okay, this is, what are some possible solutions here? What are some things you can do? What do you think that's going to accomplish? What are the results going to be if you do this? We talk through the whole thing. And okay, what are you going to do before the next time we meet? And Lorraine, he said, all right, I'm going to do this. Great. So the next time we meet, first thing I say when we get on the call is, so how did it go? Well, I haven't gotten to that yet. I haven't gotten to that. I'm going to get to it though. So our next call. So did you get to it this time? Did you get to it? No, I haven't really gotten to it yet. And what this illustrates is a real problem for so many entrepreneurs. And that is they are reacting to everything around them instead of being proactive. You have to choose to change. And change is part of growth. Whatever you're not changing, you are choosing. And this was what I told him at that point in our time together. You're not choosing to change this. Like, this is a decision you're making at this point. You know something that will probably make a difference, but you're not doing it. Why? Why was he not doing that? It's because of the mindset that he had. He felt that he was a victim of the circumstances around him. He had to read, but I've got all these clients and all these customers, my team, and all the reasons. There's so many reasons not to do something. What I find is that successful people, and what I coach people to do, is to understand this truth, that nothing is going to change until you change it. That's choice. It's a decision you and I get to make.
Yeah, I just recently had a personal discovery of my own. I used to always, when I worked late or I had to do something extra or I couldn't delegate it out and I had to do it myself, I would I'd procrastinate it, then I'd do it. Yeah. But I always thought of it as a sacrifice. Yes. And my recent change, this is actually just like brand new within the last 2 weeks, I discovered that it's a decision. It's not a sacrifice. And it made all the difference. I no longer have that sigh or that, when I have to do something, I just do it, get it done. And then here's the thing that I learned, the big thing I learned though, and it's nothing new to you probably because you work with so many people that have probably discovered this, but I learned that when I get things done, when I do what I'm supposed to, out of a decision, a choice that I made, there's where the real freedom is. And I'm sure you would agree with that. I want to talk about something else, but because, I think that there are some really, you talk about a lot about leadership, mindset. And with leadership, there's a lot of strong leaders out there and there's a lot of weak leaders, not people who are very strong. How can a person who is a good leader, how can you how could you keep us from drifting into mediocrity?
Well, I think the key word there is drift. So often when you start a new position, you start as a leader in a new organization or a new team, there's a learning curve and you're kind of kept on your toes, right? And you're having to be mindful of everything and what's going on, and you're learning and you're constantly growing until you get a handle on it. And then once you kind of get a handle on it, it feels like, okay, I can kind of throttle back a little bit now. And what I find so often is that in those situations, when a leader feels like they can kind of coast just a little bit, it's never just for a little bit, right? And that drift will always, always, always take you to mediocrity. You never drift to excellence. You always drift into mediocrity. And this is a challenge. And it's a challenge for leaders when they're in one spot for too long and they begin to get comfortable and they begin to drift. How can you avoid that? How can you avoid that? It's one word, really. It's being intentional. It's predetermining, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to say, today I'm going to be the most teachable person in every room I go into, in every conversation I'm in. I want to be the most curious person in that conversation. I'm going to ask more questions than I make statements. If you will commit to that one habit, that will change your mindset because you will begin to approach things from a posture of growth instead of a posture of drift.
Yeah. I found out, I should say, when I'm intentional about something, then that's when everything starts coming against me sometimes, meaning that, that somebody or something or wants to get me away from what I want to be intentional about. And I just read something, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, I read something about an Odysseus contract where he's the mythological figure that I guess so he wouldn't succumb to the sirens and the beautiful music. They tied him to the boat.
Right.
And so are there things when we're intentional something, do you think it's important to put things into place so you won't fail that intention?
Yes, you rise or fall to the level of your systems. And the systems are not just in your business. They're around your mindset. They're around the habits that you have in your life. And so using the example of Odysseus, which is a great one, he knew I'm not going to be capable to resist the siren call on my own. So he told his crew, he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tie me to the mast where I can't do something that's going to endanger us all. He needed the help of people around him. He built community with people around him who would then assist him where he was weak, and he could help them where they were weak.
I love the way you described that. Built community, and I think we all need community, and I think that's so important. How does my personal wiring impact my leadership?
I believe, Lorraine, that every leader is wired just a little bit different. When you become a leader and you're put into that role and you get the title or the position, often what I find, and I was guilty of this just like everybody else, often what we do is we begin to model ourselves and copy other leaders that we admire, right? Maybe it's somebody we admire from afar, maybe it's somebody we've worked personally for, but we begin to copy them. That makes sense in the beginning. That's how we all did it. But if you stay there, what happens is over time, you end up just becoming a bad copy of a great leader instead of being the leader that you are wired to be, you are designed to be. So how do you learn that? You have to learn how you're wired. Just like you study a wiring diagram of something electronic, you have a wiring diagram. There are assessments and tools that I use with coaching clients to help them understand how they are wired, how they work best. A simple one that most people have heard of is the Myers-Briggs. And the Myers-Briggs, one of the measures of that particular assessment is the introvert-extrovert scale, right? Well, if you look at that and you think, okay, here's the extrovert side, here's the introvert side. I'm way on the introvert side. I'm all the way on that side. Well, what does that mean? Well, some people would say, well, that means you hate people. You don't like to be around people. Well, that's not true at all. What it means is that I don't draw energy from being around people. I don't draw energy from large groups, right? I have to recharge my batteries in other ways, in solitude, which is why I spend so much time reading. I have been able to structure my life, my pattern, my rhythm in such a way that I'm able to lean into my wiring while not losing sight of what it is that I'm gifted to do, which is to add value to other people. And the only way to do that is to be around them. So I have to build that into my rhythm as well. Everybody has a wiring. Everybody has a wiring diagram, and you need to understand it. And too many people are instead trying to copy somebody else instead of learning how they are designed.
I love that. I know, I remember I'm on the other end. I'm way wired I do get my energy from people. I am an extrovert, is why COVID did not do me any good.
Yeah, right.
It was really hard. I could just remember saying, I just need a hug.
Hard to do that 6 feet apart.
I know. It was just a really crazy time. So I'm going to switch gears now. I'm going to start getting a little personal, and then I'm going to ask you a final question in a bit. But, I had been looking through your one sheet and everything, and I saw that you had a daughter that had a cancer diagnosis. Mm-hmm. How did that, and I went all three areas. I know I'm mainly a business podcast, but I'm a spiritual person too. So how did it impact your family, your faith, and your leadership?
No, this was in 2019. And at the time, my older daughter was 14 years old, and she started having headaches. And we thought maybe she's developing migraines. I've suffered from those since I was about her age. So we thought maybe that's what it was. Go to the doctor, you get medicine. It's not really effective. You go back to the doctor, and the cycle. You just kind of keep going until you figure it out. Eventually, they run some scans and discovered that she had a brain tumor on the back right side of her brain. Now, there's no history of this in our family, no record. I mean, no reason for this. It's just out of the blue, like so many things are. And 2 days later, they rushed her to the hospital, the nearest large hospital that had the facility to do it. The pediatric neurosurgeon took it out 2 days later, and 2 days later, she's home. And then we wait for the diagnosis of what it was. Well, it turned out it's a very rare form of cancer. Only about 50 teenagers a year in the world are diagnosed with it. And that started a journey for us. As we began to move toward treatment and relocating to another city where they had the treatment options that she needed, for 7 weeks and staying there. And it's a really big journey. But one of the things that I learned during that time, and one of the things that I talk to my clients about and people about today, is that in that moment, it's too late to build your foundation. You have whatever foundation you have. You can't build it in crisis. The strength of our family, my faith, my leadership, all of that is what it is in that moment. You're not going to add to it. You're not going to make it any stronger. This is when it gets tested. And what I discovered during that season was something that I have talked about a lot since then, which is that, one day somebody else is going to sit in the chair that you sit in, and somebody else is going to sit in the chair that I sit in. One day they are. Then what? Then what? Well, the relationships that are closest to us so often are the ones that we sacrifice, right? We sacrifice those relationships on the altar of success. But one day somebody else is going to sit in that chair and reap those rewards. Then what? Then what are those relationships that are closest to you going to be then? I've spent a lot of time with people toward the end of their lives, and what I've discovered is that not once in the dozens and dozens of people that I've talked to at this point in their life, not once have I ever heard anybody say, boy, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. If we just hit our next quarter numbers, our KPIs were so close, one more quarter, we could have done it. Never once. What I have heard is regrets around relationships, regrets around conversations that never happened, relationships that were never mended, relationships that weren't invested in because they were spending too much time at the office. And I believe I'm not going to live long enough to make all the mistakes myself. I want to learn from other people so that I can avoid some of the ditches that they drove into. In this case, during that season, for my life, my family, my leadership, my faith, what this taught me was the value of the relationships closest to me and how important it is that I prioritize what is most important.
Yeah, I was just going to say, absolutely. I agree 100% with you. I think too, I remember going through a personal crisis of my own, and, my husband and I were actually going through it together and just with our children, because, once you add another child into your life, it just gets more interesting and more interesting. And we look back at that period of our life and say, gosh, how did we would have never gotten through that without our faith, our faith. And it is true. It's like, and it's also, there's an intention involved in there too, because you get to decide during this very bad time how you're going to show up every day.
That's right.
And, you could be, I remember somebody saying to me while I was going through some of the stuff we went through that literally I've been an encouragement. And I'm like thinking, really? I'm glad. I'm glad I didn't curse you out.
Right.
But somebody else actually pulled me aside and said, I've been watching you, and just remember other people are watching you too.
Yeah.
And so, at that point, I actually was a leader in a church.
Wow.
So it was like, I didn't, you don't know that people are watching you or who's watching you. And hopefully the person that they see is the same person that's behind closed doors too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes that's a little bit off a little bit. And so I think that's one of the good things about being a great leader is that you are the same constant, when people are looking and when people are not looking.
That's so funny. I think one of the greatest compliments that people have ever given me is they say, you seem the same in person as you do on the platform, on the stage, like when you're speaking. And I think that's one of the greatest compliments, right? Not that I get it right all the time, but that level of authenticity is what I strive for. It's what I aim for, because I think that's what real leadership is. It's not posturing. It's not putting on a facade that you want other people to admire. It's being who you are, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever. This is who I am. I struggle. I have good days. I have hard days, just like everybody else.
Absolutely. I love when people come up to me and say, you look, especially somebody I know from high school, oh, you look the same from high school. I'm like, yeah, You are on my good list today.
That's right. I don't get that much. They were like, you had more hair then.
Yeah, that's like nobody told us about what it was like to get old. And, and
Yeah.
it's funny because I'm sure you get this with a lot of your clients. If you have any, baby boomer clients, they do want, I know for myself, I want to leave some kind of legacy.
Yeah.
And that's more important to me than money or fame or anything, is that when I want to be remembered for somebody who was kind, who cared, who genuinely did the best she could in what she had.
Yeah.
And I think for, you do an amazing job because you work with people day in and day out and help them see a better self. And I think that's so important. Shifting gears again.
Yeah.
You're a business owner, and what do you like the best about owning your own business and being in charge of and leading well?
That good or bad, right or wrong, the decision stops with me. And I can't point a finger at anyone else and say, well, they made me, or I had to because they said. No, I'm responsible. I like that responsibility. It's heavy, and I don't always get it right, but I get to learn from that and seeing those opportunities not as failures, but as opportunities to learn and get better. I was telling my wife earlier today, actually, about something that I tried this morning for the second time. First one went smooth as silk. This second time crashed and burned. Did not work. Technical issues, I'm sure, dealing with something I did. And so frustrating on one hand, but the second time I told her, I said, well, you know what? This is just one step closer to it being smooth every time. And I just have to remind myself of that. That's a mindset that we get to choose. Now, I could stomp around and grouse and complain. That's not hard. Anybody can do that. I want to flip the mindset and say, this is one step closer. This is one step closer to getting it right and being consistent every time.
Love that. We all struggle. I think that there's no entrepreneur out there that hasn't had some kind of or some form of struggle.
Yeah.
What is one thing as being an entrepreneur that you have struggled with?
I think it has changed over time. I've been coaching leaders now for just over 25 years. And I think early on, there was a very real sense of imposter syndrome frequently. Who am I? Who am I to coach other leaders? Like, I'm still learning. That still rears its head up some days because I am still learning and I'm still growing and I'm still making mistakes. And so there is that sense of like, who am I to do that? That has been something that has been prevalent throughout. It's not as in my face as it used to be because I've learned ways to deal with it as I've helped my clients deal with it. I've also learned to help myself deal with it. But I don't think it's ever going to go away, Lorraine. I think it's something that I'm just going to deal with.
Yeah. It's, I think we all deal with that and we all struggle with that. And then all of a sudden it's just one day, I just remember when I used to struggle with that a lot. And I just remember one day, I all of a sudden felt that I was enough and I was good enough to be there. And that was like one of my biggest things. My biggest thing was not being enough, not being good enough.
Oh, that's good.
And so it's definitely something that we all struggle with. One piece of advice, if there was one universal piece of advice that you can give that would go across like startups, people who are thinking of starting a business or people who are seasoned, what would that one piece of advice be?
Every day when you get out of bed, choose to have a teachable spirit. Choose it intentionally, purposefully, out loud. I will be the most teachable person in every room I'm in today. It's a choice that costs you nothing, but you will never regret it because you will learn more from that posture. You will find more success from that posture than from the posture I see in so many, which is, I don't need that. I got it. I got this.
Yeah, it gives a little humility to the whole.
A little bit.
Definitely factors in humility. Well, I want to thank you. This has been amazing. You are an amazing person. I I love everything that you had to say. If somebody resonated with you today, do you have something that you would like to, how could they get in contact with you? Something you'd like to share with them?
Absolutely. So they can go to my website, catalyticleadership.net. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing things there about what I'm learning. And for your listeners, I would love to give them a free copy of the book that I published last year. It's called Catalytic Leadership. It's out of all the coaching conversations that I've had over the last 25 plus years, there are 12 threads, 12 principles that run through so many of those. And what I did in the book is try to capture those so that anybody can benefit from those and can learn how they can be more catalytic as a leader and make a difference. So they go to catalyticleadershipbook.com. And if they're willing to pay the shipping, I will get a paperback copy of that book in their hands as quickly as I can.
That would be great. Well, thank you so much again. And everyone out there, till next week, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at Biz Gone Social for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.